So I'd like to welcome all of you, and also those who are joining us around the world through the internet. And a special word of thanks to Adriano Massi, who is the face behind the camera, fortunately, who has done a tremendous amount of work using his expertise. He's our director of IT in the community, runs our website, and also manages this transmission very effectively. So a very warm welcome to all of you as we begin this Holy Week retreat. The theme of the talks that I'd like to explore is the theme of solitude and relationship, solitude and community, and how these interact and require each other, depend on each other. So our format will be, I'll begin each of these sessions with a talk and some reflection on this theme, and I'll be invoking a couple of spiritual friends to help us on this journey of exploration. One is Saint Benedict from the 6th century, in the one who brought Western monasticism to its order and harmony, really, and Shanti, the 8th century Indian Buddhist teacher. And both the rule of Saint Benedict and Shantideva's guide to the Bodhisattva's way of life, I think, should be good guides for us as we reflect upon our spiritual journey and upon the relationship of solitude and community as we make that journey. After the talk, we will meditate together, and on some days we will have an opportunity for some discussion and conversation and questions. Tonight we'll just meditate together after this talk, and we'll stay online for the meditation, so those of you who are joining us, whether it's, I worked this out actually, 6 a.m. in Suva in Fiji, or 12 o'clock noon in Mexico City, wherever you may be. If you would like to stay and meditate with us, we'll stay online during the meditation. Let me begin with a story from the Desert Fathers and Mothers. This was the period of the early church where Christian monasticism began in the deserts of Egypt. And right from the very beginning, this balance between community and solitude was an essential element of this journey. So I think we have a lot to learn from those predecessors, those pioneers of this journey in our tradition. And this story, coming from that early tradition, I think captures something of what I'd like to say in the coming days as we make our journey through Holy Week. A brother became tired of his community and of the behavior of others, and other people often annoyed him. That sound familiar? Some of you are living in community already here in different houses on the island, so you've had 24 hours to begin to explore that. He decided, I will go off somewhere on my own. And then I won't talk to anyone, and I won't listen to anyone, and I shall be at peace. And this anger that I feel will leave me. Anger is one of the disordered states of mind that the desert teachers were most conscious of and most nervous about, really, because it's a very insidious kind of disorder, emotion. It creeps up on us when we sometimes least expect it, and it's very difficult to control once it's let loose. So this monk was obviously nervous about the anger that he was feeling, and he thought the best thing he could do would be to get away from other people. So he went out into the desert and made his home in a cave. One day, as he was living there on his own, he put a jug of water that he'd filled on the ground. And as he put it on the ground, it rolled over, and all the water spilled out. So he said, well, nothing else to do today, I'll go and fill it up again. So he went and filled it up, he brought it back, he put it on the ground, and it fell over again, and everything spilled. So he said, okay, try it again. So he filled the water jug, put it down on the ground, and as soon as he turned his back, it rolled over and it spilled all the contents. And when this happened the third time, he became enraged. He took hold of the jug and smashed it on the ground. As he calmed down, and anger of course subsides after a while, we can't stay in a continuous state of violent anger. As his anger calmed down, he realized that the anger had mastered him. And he said, here I am, by myself, and anger has beaten me. So I will return to the community. He went back to the community and realized that the best way he could overcome this demon of anger was to live with others. Whenever we live, wherever we live, we need to work and to be patient with God's help. In the letter of James, this quality of patience in the New Testament is one of the strong themes. Be patient, beloved, until the coming of the Lord. This word patience is something we might reflect on at the beginning of Holy Week, and on this day, Passion Sunday, Palm Sunday, especially. At Mass this morning here on Bere Island, we read the whole story of the Passion of Jesus, the trial, the suffering and the crucifixion. We told that story again and listened to it at the beginning of these days of Holy Week, where we enter into the story and we allow the story to enter into us through reflection and through time. And during the Mass, or at the end of the Mass actually, we gave all the people on at the Mass one of these little crosses which our younger meditators had made from wood on the island, and we gave one to each person there with the suggestion that they keep this with them during the week in their pocket or in their bag, and hold it occasionally to remind themselves of the story that we are part of this week, the Passion of Christ. And then on Good Friday, we will invite all those who come to venerate the cross to place their cross that they've been carrying with them beside the cross that we venerate. And then at the Easter Vigil on Saturday night, we can pick it up again. We won't pick up the same one, we'll pick up a transformed cross, our suffering symbolically transformed through its union with the cross and the resurrection of Christ. So this word patience takes us to the heart of the meaning of this Passion of Christ, because the word patience actually comes from a word that means passion, what we go through, what we suffer, what we endure, what we pass through. And there are certain things in life that you simply have to go through. You can't run away from them indefinitely. You have to accept them. You can't deny it anymore. There's a certain point where denial has to stop. You have to face yourself and face reality. And this is the moment where the passion, the transforming passion begins. This moment of acceptance, this moment of endurance. And when we go through that, when we accept the full reality of things as they are, that is where we are transformed. So patience and the passion take us really to the heart of the meaning of what we're going to be reflecting on. I have a little addiction, which I should like to tell you about, which is to the game of patience, solitaire, on my iPad. And I try not to do more than 2 games at a time, because I usually fail to complete the game. And my first feeling when I fail is to blame the people who devised this app, that they hadn't done it properly and that the cards are not equally randomly distributed. So your first reaction at failure is impatience, and anger comes out very quickly. And yet it's a very good test, of course, to persevere, to endure, but don't become compulsive about it, and to keep coming back to it. Instead of blaming other people, to accept your own responsibility, your own unique form of the cross. So, this is what we are going to try to help each other to do as we walk this retreat together. We make this retreat, we make the journey of Holy Week together very differently. Some of us have taken a week off to come to Bere Island. Some are tuning in when they're free, different parts of the world, according to where we live and how we live this week. And these differences in the way we make the retreat are similar to the differences in lifestyle that we all have. Differences of vocation. Traditionally, in the Christian understanding of life, there is the active life, there is the contemplative life, and there is the mixed life, where we are both active and contemplative. And most of the masters in this tradition would agree that in fact you can't live a completely active life. You have to have offline moments, and if we don't allow ourselves times of silence, of stillness, times of deep rest, then we suffer stress, we suffer anxiety, we fall out of balance. And on the other hand, we cannot live a completely contemplative life. We have to eat, we have to drink, we have to wash, we have to, look after the affairs of life to some degree. So most of the masters of the tradition say that really every life is a mixed life of active and contemplative elements, depending on our circumstances and depending on our temperament as well. So, what about you? What kind of vocation do you have? How do you balance the active and contemplative, the Martha and the Mary dimensions of your own life? Have you seen a change in the way that you balance these two elements of life over the last year, since we were here, or over the last few years, or since you've begun to meditate? Have you noticed that this chemistry, and it is a kind of a chemistry between the active and contemplative, is changing? And how do you recognize these changes? One good way of answering that question, I think, is to look at the idea of a call, or of a vocation, that we respond to something beyond the ego's agenda. We don't just choose, as it were, a designer style of life. We don't just take it off a shelf. We don't just put the pieces together according to our own self-image or our own, feeling of what would fulfill us. Deeper than that is the experience of a vocation. The word vocation comes from the Latin vocare, to call. And have you ever felt that there is something calling you in your life? Something that is beyond the ego and yet deep within yourself, that is in touch with your truest and deepest self. If you have, then you may quite quickly recognize the ways in which you play a role, and you catch yourself acting, not actually living, but acting a role, doing what you think other people will like or will approve, or complying with social expectations about your career or about your way of life in any form. So as soon as I think we begin to meditate, we begin to sense that there is something deep within us calling us, and listening to this call, we'll come back to this idea of listening, following this call, being in touch with it, and it's very much about being in touch, is going to change us. It's going to, as we follow it, we will not only come to self-knowledge, but we will see changes in the way we live and respond to the events of life. So it's not about just playing a role, it's more about living a life. I think it was Pascal who said that if you play the role of an angel, you will end up living like a beast. Roles eventually break down, they disappoint us. We may deceive ourselves, we may even effectively deceive others, but eventually the act is exposed. The dishonesty or the lack of integrity is revealed, and we find ourselves seeking again a deeper and a truer self. Now, different vocations, different callings in life, different ways of life, attract us in different ways. I suppose everybody has been attracted at some point to ways of life that you see the point in, or seem attractive to you, although you say to yourself, well, that could be nice, might be nice to do that, or live like that, but I probably couldn't do it, or I wouldn't be able to do it for very long. So different vocations have different kinds of attraction. And once we have responded to a particular call, we find ourselves living in a particular way, whether it's monastic life, whether it's married life, or whether it's a very active life, or whether it's a more contemplative, withdrawn kind of life. These may change different phases in our life, different periods, at different ages we may feel we need to shift to another form of life. But almost inevitably, I think, whatever form of life we choose or we feel called to follow, we sense that the grass is greener in another way of life. It's not long before we think, I wonder whether I've made the right choice. When we go to the place we want to go to, or we get what we have been wanting, before long we must face a feeling of doubt, or disappointment even. Maybe I made the wrong choice. Maybe I'm not going to get what I want. Maybe being here isn't the best place to be. Maybe it's bad weather, or bad company. Or maybe just like that hermit, you discover that you made the wrong choice. But in making that choice, and then in seeing the consequences, you learn something about yourself that's beneficial, and it puts you back on the right track again. It may be the feeling, in spiritual terms, that we've made a choice of a particular path, but then we feel we're making no progress. It's become rather stale. We don't have the excitement that we usually have at the beginning of something. Any form of satisfaction will eventually lead to dissatisfaction. And we have to be prepared for that. Going through that dissatisfaction is the best way we have to find true joy. And in a way, the sooner we find that dissatisfaction, the better. The sooner we begin to mature in the choices that we make. And the sooner we can recognize these doubts or these feelings of dissatisfaction, the sooner we can overcome them and become more simple. In the desert tradition, they call this acedia. And it's worth talking about acedia at the beginning of the retreat, because I think everybody comes and starts a retreat with a certain degree of hope and expectation. Well, we're only going to be here for 1 week, so we may not go into deep acedia, but everybody will go through certain patterns, certain shifts of mood, certain moments where things don't look as optimistic or as joyful as they seemed at the beginning. Acedia is something you experience in marriage. You experience it at the beginning of monastic life. And every meditator, it becomes experienced with acedia. Acedia is the feeling of dissatisfaction, the feeling of doubt, the feeling that we're not making the progress we want to make. And usually acedia is related to anger in some way. We feel angry with ourselves, we feel angry with the jug of water that keeps on spilling over, we feel angry with the environment or with the people we're living with. Anger is an inevitable part, I think, of acedia. The feeling that we're not getting what we want. And that little 2-year-old ego within us is in a rage at times when it doesn't get what it wants, when it feels disappointment or dissatisfaction. And this is the best thing that can happen to us. If you want to grow in yourself and in the spiritual journey, we need to be able to recognize and confront these feelings. Evagrius, again one of the great teachers of the desert tradition, said, "Take away temptations and no one will be saved. No one will be made whole without going through these times of testing, these times of difficulty." And one of the great women teachers of the desert, Amma Theodora, said, "Let us strive to enter by the narrow gate. Just as the trees, if they have not stood before the winter's storms, cannot bear fruit, so with us. And this present age," she says, "is a storm. And it is only through many trials and temptations that we obtain an inheritance in the kingdom of heaven." So, because of the kind of culture that we live in, the culture that is based upon certain ideas of fulfillment and happiness and consumption and self-satisfaction. Because of that, I think we approach the spiritual journey with certain kinds of conditioning that we have to very quickly learn to get over. And if we don't overcome these conditionings, we're going to find ourselves frequently giving up the practice, giving up the path, giving up the discipline that we have embraced. And we don't need to. We don't need to. We only have to be prepared for these moments of testing, and then, when they come, recognize them and be glad. Okay? I'll get through this with a little help from my friends. So a good retreat also involves some struggle. So be prepared for it and learn from it. And then even the shadow side that might come up during a time of serious spiritual practice becomes a help towards enlightenment. So face the different weather patterns in your mind. Here on Bere Island, you see many weathers in the same day. This evening, as I was walking down from my house, and it's a cold day here on Bere Island, and it's been windy and a bit rainy. But the light on the mountain on Hungry Hill over on the mainland was just spectacular. The sun, a little bit of sun anyway, hitting the side of the mountain. And if we're sensitive to what is happening within ourselves, we can accept the changing weather patterns of our moods, of our minds, of our ups and downs, without being overwhelmed by them, without having to run away from them. And this idea of stability, just hanging in there when the going gets tough, looking for help where you need it, being open to others in your solitude, that's vital to any understanding of human growth and development. And that's also what teaches us about priorities. Happiness really consists in establishing priorities. What really is important to you? What takes you closest to your true self? And staying with those priorities is what we call the discipline, really, of the spiritual journey. And a good retreat also teaches us about priorities. And on a retreat like this, as in the desert tradition, the first priority is contemplation. So we're here because we understand, we want to understand more deeply the primacy of contemplation. And it was because of this top human priority that the monks, men and women of the 3rd and 4th centuries and 5th centuries went out into the desert of northern Egypt to begin the Christian monastic movement. It's why the Irish monks went out to Skellig, a few miles from here, that amazing, dramatic 700-foot rock in the middle of the Atlantic, 7 miles off the coast, and established in this remote and solitary place a little monastic community. The primacy of contemplation. It's why we seek out solitary places. And perhaps for us today, Bere Island is a new Skellig. A Skellig for busy people, coming from busy urban centres and busy lifestyles. Skellig was home to this small community of monks. We don't know much about how they lived there, but we know that they lived there until about the 12th century. And then, having become a place of contemplation, For maybe 600 years it became more a place of, well, pilgrimage and maybe a little bit of superstition as well. But here today on Bere Island, I think we've come to a solitary place, an island, in the same way that those predecessors of ours on the same human journey sought out a solitary place. And even on Skellig, in that most remote of places, the monks needed both community and solitude. They needed to be in solitude because they needed to find who they were, to shed their roles, their play acting, especially the ways in which we act to ourselves or act to God, as well as the way we act to others. To be in solitude healthily means really being with God. Being with God means being with all, with creation. That's why those early Celtic monks had such a passionate love for nature, were so observant of the weather. I don't think they ever complained about the weather, they just observed it and accepted it. And being in solitude means to recognize and accept your own uniqueness. To be with God requires the sacramental sign of the divine life. And that sacramental sign is other people. To be with God, to be with all, means also that we know that we are with others, being with others. And it's about being really with, not just using them, certainly not using them to run away from our own solitude. To be in solitude only with yourself is isolation. It's a form of spiritual death, and it leads to profound sickness of soul, that loneliness which is a very major aspect of our culture today, Western culture, and the depression that often is associated with that. Solitude requires some level of withdrawal. You don't have to go on to Skellig. You might just come to Bere Island for a week. And indeed, every time we meditate, we are withdrawing, aren't we? We withdraw from activity and from speech, from doing and from talking, from mental chatter. And in this sense, every meditator is a monk. St. Benedict says that the monk is somebody who truly seeks God, truly seeks this connection with all, to be in harmony with all. And it means setting your mind on the kingdom before everything else. That's the priority, that's the primacy of contemplation. This is what Jesus says as one of the necessities of the spiritual journey, that we set our mind on God's kingdom before everything else, trusting that everything else that we need will come to us as well in due course. Now, not all monks are meditators, but all meditators in this sense are monks, essentially, anyway, in the practice itself. So solitude is helped by coming to a remote place, like an island on the edge of Europe. Here on Bere Island you have a population of about 200 people. You have one school, one heritage centre, one post office shop, one church, one standing stone in the middle of the island where we will go on at dawn on Easter Sunday morning, one wedge tomb, about 4,000 years old from the Neolithic period, and 2 pubs. So a very balanced kind of place of solitude. And to come here means that we reduce our doing, our activity, and we reduce our probable level, high level, or even compulsive level of communicating. It's hard to do, to change gears as you begin a retreat like this. Turning off mobile phones while you meditate is a big challenge for many people. That's why I think, many people simply don't hear. At the beginning of a meditation period, people are usually told, turn off your mobile phone, please, but we block it out, because turning off the mobile phone is like what? It's like turning off our connection. We may be getting a very important call. We may be getting the call from the person we've been longing to hear from, or getting the news we've been longing to get. So turning off the phone is a symbol, really, of what we're doing when we withdraw into solitude. Withdrawal leads us inevitably to withdrawal symptoms. We probably will have to let go of certain addictions. They may be strong addictions or weak addictions. But we also have the support of others on this journey and in this work of withdrawal. And if we can withdraw, then we discover a deeper breathing of the spirit, an expansion of our spiritual lungs, and an expansion of mind takes place beyond the familiar patterns of our compulsive behavior. And this is really impossible. This is the wisdom of all spiritual traditions. This is really impossible to do without spiritual friendship, without community. The key aspect of this cultivation, you might call it, of the mind and of the spirit, is leisure. It's a very important word, leisure. In most of our big cities, there are leisure centres where people go to be entertained or to work out or to occupy their time. But leisure centres are often very distracted places, or very compulsive, very busy places. The word leisure is related to a word, an old French word, that means permission. Permission. To have leisure means that you give yourself permission. It's also related to the idea of capacity. So, if you have real leisure, you give yourself permission to expand your capacity. One of the reasons that people say that they can't meditate is very often that they are too busy, or there are too many things to do, too many phone calls to make, too many trips to make, too many things to do. And it requires leisure to meditate. You have to give yourself permission to expand that inner capacity, to do something different, to break with compulsive habits, and to develop our capacity for being. Essentially, to have leisure, that's again what a time of retreat is about, just as the individual period of meditation is about that as well. To be at leisure, in this sense, is to be freed from distraction, to have the capacity to pay attention, to be still, to set your mind on one thing, and to be in the present moment. And the first thing that happens when we enter that state of leisure is that we may panic. We may just feel overwhelmed by all the things we could be doing, or should be doing, or all the other things we could be doing. You know what I mean? And as soon as we start to meditate, we will confront our desires, maybe the immediate desires, or the long-term desires of our lives. We will confront our distractions, the ways in which we usually run away from difficult situations, and our disappointments. But if we accept this opportunity for leisure, then we very quickly begin to see beyond these desires, distractions, and disappointments. We just see that they are not the only thing on the horizon. They are not the only or the most powerful thing in our minds. So I'd just like to end by having a quick look, to introduce perhaps our two friends that we're going to work with during these coming days, St. Benedict and Shanti. Because both of them, I think, have this understanding that in the human journey there is a critical point, a critical turning point. And in that critical turning point, we discover the priorities of life, we discover the need and the capacity we have for leisure, and how we respond to that turning point will really decide the direction in which our lives unfold. This is what St. Benedict says. He's putting it in terms of this call, the sense of responding to some deep inner movement or intuition or something beyond the ego that calls us to a new place. He says, "Let us arise then at last, for the scripture says, stirring us up, now is the hour for us to rise from sleep. Let us open our eyes to the divinizing light. Let us hear with attentive ears. Run while you have the light of life, unless the darkness of death overtake you." And what can be sweeter to us, dear brothers and sisters, than this voice of the Lord inviting us? Behold, in his loving kindness, the Lord shows us the way of life. Shanti, the Buddhist teacher, the 8th century, also tells us that at this turning point in our lives, we see something. St. Benedict calls it the divinizing light, the light that changes us into the divine. And Shanti says, don't waste this moment, and don't waste the leisure that is given to you. And for him, it's the leisure required, the permission or the capacity to practice the Dharma. The benefit, he says, is in what he calls recognizing the spirit of awakening. So what might correspond to the idea of a call in Benedict is this experience of the spirit of awakening for Shantideva. He calls it the jewel of the spirit of awakening. It's something we must hold fast to. It's a great gift to experience this, to recognize this shift, this movement within ourselves, calling us to enlightenment. And Shanti Dava says there are two aspects to this. One is the aspiration for awakening. So it's the wanting to be enlightened. Just becoming aware that we can be enlightened. But the second aspect of it is even more important, which is venturing towards awakening. So it's actually doing something about it, actually entering into the process of awakening. And the tipping point between the two is the attitude that we adopt towards the spirit of awakening, which means we don't see it just in terms of our own enlightenment, or of our own fulfillment, or of our own satisfaction. But what really shifts us into the real journey is the desire to liberate limitless sentient beings, to do this in a selfless way. He says, in this way I shall eliminate the headaches of sentient beings. The jewel of the mind, the seed of the world's joy, the remedy for the world's suffering, is this altruism, this desire deep within ourselves. It's more than an egotistical desire to follow this path, this calling, as Benedict would describe it, not just for ourselves in a narrow, self-centered way, but so that we can become a mine of joy for others. And this equates, it seems to me, very much to Benedict's concept of obedience. He begins the rule with the word listen. Listen, my child, to the words of a loving father. This deep listening and is what is expressed in his thinking by the vow of obedience, which is the way in which we transcend the narrow self-centeredness of the ego, just doing our own will, just what we want to do. And in this deep listening that becomes possible as we take the attention off ourselves, we learn to listen to God's word as something alive and active in others. We become attuned to others. We become attuned to their well-being, not just to our own satisfaction. This is what Father John understands happens when we start to meditate. When we begin the first steps, the small little steps we have to take, just to take the attention off ourselves. And as we do that, and as we develop the capacity to do this, if we give ourselves the leisure to do this work, then we find ourselves filled, as St. Benedict says in the prologue, with the indescribable sweetness of love, the bliss, the ananda of the spirit. So that's the journey of life, and that's what I hope these days of Holy Week can be for us as we reflect upon this human journey and our own particular vocation within the context of the mystery of Christ in these days of Holy Week. Let's take our time for meditation now. Just take a moment to shift and move and loosen up any tension in your shoulders, in your neck. Sitting very still the last 40 minutes or so. So just take a moment to move clear your throat, blow your nose. And I'll just take a moment to introduce you again, for many of you, to the very simple practice of meditation as we teach it in this tradition. Simple, remember, does not mean easy, but simple is simple. The first step is to be still. So that's why sitting comfortably is important, so that you can maintain a physical stillness. Physical fidgeting is really the physical equivalent of mental distraction. So if we can control our physical fidgeting, that will also help to control the level of mental distraction. So find a comfortable position, your feet on the ground, your hands on your lap or on your knees. Relax your shoulders, relax the muscles of your face where we carry a lot of tension. Let go of all the thoughts that we've been entertaining. Let go of your thoughts about the past. Let go of any thoughts about whether I'm happy or unhappy, whether I've made the right decision or the wrong decision. Let go of thoughts about the future. In meditation, we let go of all thoughts. We lay aside thoughts, words, and imagination. It doesn't mean we just turn it off like we turn off the gas or turn off an electric light. But it means that we take our attention off this stream of mental activity. And we do that in this tradition. It comes to us from those early desert mothers and fathers. In this very simple way, we take a single word or a short phrase and we repeat this word or phrase silently, continuously in our mind and heart. And of course, as words and thoughts and images and questions, am I happy, am I not happy, and so on, as all of this comes into the mind, we deal with these thoughts in the same way. Whether they're good thoughts, or bad thoughts, or happy thoughts, or sad thoughts, we deal with them simply by letting them go and by returning to our word. So choosing the word is important because we stay with the same word all the way through the meditation and from day to day. The word I would recommend is the word Maranatha. It's an ancient Christian prayer that means, "Come, Lord," in the language that Jesus spoke. And if you choose this word, say it as 4 syllables, Ma, Ra, Na, Tha. Articulate the word clearly in your mind and heart. Say it gently, without force. Don't visualize the word, but just sound it and listen to it. Remember that deep listening, that obedience of St. Benedict. So we listen to the word without thinking about the meaning of it and letting go of all thoughts. Say the word faithfully. So whenever you realize that you've stopped saying it and your mind is wandering, just come back to it without judging yourself and start saying the word again, simply, without analyzing yourself. So again, try to sit as still as you can with your back straight. Relax your shoulders, close your eyes lightly, and silently, in your mind and heart, begin to say your word. Ma, Ra, Na, Tha. Ma, Ra, Na, Tha. Vince will lead us into the silence now with a little music, and we'll meditate for about 20 minutes this evening.